They took her in the dead of night, a shadow slipping past the edges of the world, leaving her to awaken in a cell that smelled of rust and despair. The walls were cold, hard and unyielding, as if they had been built to contain not just her body, but her very soul. Her captors moved with practiced cruelty, convinced that fear could bend her, that isolation could break her spirit. They were wrong. She quickly realized that the cage around her was physical, but the real prison existed in the mind of those who thought they could control her. Days melted into nights, indistinguishable and monotonous. Food arrived on metal trays with mechanical precision, lacking warmth or humanity. Conversation was a danger, a potential trigger for punishment. So she learned the art of silence. Every shadow became a companion, every crack in the wall a landmark in her mental map of the cell. She memorized the routines of the guards, their shifts and habits, their weaknesses. Each observation was fuel, a spark that kept her mind alive even when her body was held captive. Despite the relentless confinement, her imagination became her sanctuary. She walked invisible paths in her mind, rehearsing escape, envisioning freedom, creating worlds where she could move unbound and strong. Pain and fear became tools rather than chains, sharpened and controlled, like knives honed to a deadly edge. Every bruise and insult was catalogued, not as a defeat, but as a lesson in patience and endurance. In those long, silent hours, she whispered words that belonged only to her. I will not break. I will not vanish. I will rise. And with each repetition, each imagined plan, each quiet act of defiance, she nurtured a fire that no cage could contain. A storm that would one day shatter the very walls meant to hold her. The first seeds of her power had been planted, hidden but unstoppable. Solitude became her fiercest teacher, a mirror that reflected every doubt, fear, and insecurity she carried inside. In the silence of her cell, her mind became both battlefield and sanctuary. Shadows of despair whispered relentlessly, promising defeat, telling her she was nothing, that she would never escape, that she was already broken. But she quickly learned to recognize these voices. They were echoes of the world beyond the walls, the judgments, the dismissals, the disbelief she had long endured. She refused to surrender to them. Instead, she turned inward, training her mind as rigorously as any warrior trains their body. She created mental exercises to strengthen her resolve, rehearsing confrontations, victories, and escapes in vivid detail. Meditation became her shield, and visualization her sword. She imagined herself standing tall, unbroken, commanding the very forces that sought to subdue her. Each night, she walked through invisible arenas where she tested her courage, honed her instincts, and rehearsed the strategies she would need to reclaim her life. Fear no longer controlled her. It became a tool. Pain became a teacher, shaping her into someone who could endure more than anyone expected. She cataloged her captors' habits, their weaknesses, the small cracks in their armor, and stored them like precious secrets for a time she knew would come. She learned patience, understanding that power was not about immediate action, but about timing, awareness, and preparation. In those long hours, she transformed. She no longer saw herself as a prisoner, but as a force biding its time. The cage could hold her body, but it could not contain her spirit. Every thought of despair was met with defiance. Every pang of fear answered with courage. Slowly, inexorably, she became unstoppable within. A silent storm, gathering strength. ready to rise. And in that inner fortress, she discovered the first taste of the power that would one day shatter her chains completely. The first victories came quietly, almost imperceptibly, but they changed everything. A guard's momentary lapse, a door left slightly ajar, a routine overlooked. These were tiny openings, almost laughable in their insignificance, yet they became her footholds. She learned to see opportunity where others saw only confinement, to turn the smallest advantage into a step toward control. Every detail mattered: the pattern of the guard's steps, the rhythm of their conversations, the subtle tension in their movements. She cataloged it all in her mind, storing it like treasure for the day she would need it most. She began to assert influence in subtle, calculated ways. A glance here, a word there. An expression carefully measured. Each gesture shifted the balance of power without anyone realizing it. Her captors believed they commanded her entirely, but in truth, she was quietly orchestrating her environment. Survival was no longer enough. She was building a foundation for something greater, a strategy that only patience could perfect. Every small success reinforced her confidence and reshaped her identity. She learned to hide her fury and fear while strengthening her resolve. She manipulated situations to test boundaries, to see what she could bend without breaking. Always careful, always precise. Each minor triumph was a rehearsal for the greater victories she knew were coming. Through these small acts, she transformed from a passive prisoner into an active strategist. She discovered the power of knowledge, observation, and timing. What her captors failed to see was that their arrogance, their assumption of complete control, had blinded them to the growing force within her. And while they believed she was merely enduring, she was preparing. Every calculated move, every quiet victory, brought her closer to the moment when the cage would no longer hold her. And when it shattered, it would be a storm they could never withstand. The opportunity arrived suddenly, like lightning striking without warning. Yet it was the culmination of months of observation, planning, and silent preparation. A guard's carelessness, a neglected latch, a fleeting moment of distraction, all aligned perfectly, offering her a chance to act. She moved with precision, each step deliberate, each breath measured, honed by countless hours of mental rehearsal. She was no longer the frightened prisoner. She had become a force of calculated determination, ready to reclaim her life. Every motion was purposeful, every decision weighed against the risks and rewards. She navigated the shadows with a predator's grace, aware of every sound, every shift in the environment, every potential threat. The cage had taught her patience, observation, and timing, lessons that now became her weapons. Fear, once a relentless enemy, had been transformed into awareness, guiding her movements with clarity and focus. She felt the chains of confinement loosen, not only in her body, but in the control her captors had over her mind. Breaking free was more than a physical act. It was symbolic. Each step outside the cell represented a reclamation of power, a dismantling of the control her captors had believed they held. She felt an exhilaration that was as terrifying as it was liberating. A rush born from the recognition that she had outsmarted and outlasted them. The world outside awaited, but so did the lessons of the cage. By the time she emerged into open space, the woman who walked free was transformed. The ordeal had forged her into someone sharper, stronger, and more resolute than she had ever imagined. Her captor's dominance had been an illusion. The true power now resided within her. The cage, meant to imprison her, had instead become the crucible in which her strength and resilience were tempered, preparing her for the moment when she would not just escape, but rise unstoppable. Emerging from her triumph, she realized that freedom alone was not enough. True power required mastery over every aspect of her life, every decision, and every connection. The world that had once seemed vast and overwhelming now appeared as a landscape she could navigate with intent and authority. Every choice she made was informed by the lessons of captivity, patience, observation, timing, and the understanding that strength is not merely physical, but mental and emotional. She had been forged in the crucible of suffering, and now she was ready to wield that fire with precision. Her influence spread quietly at first, through acts of insight and subtle intervention. She identified those who sought to harm others and neutralized their impact, not recklessly, but strategically, ensuring that justice was delivered with the effectiveness of someone who had known what true helplessness felt like. Each action reinforced her sovereignty, demonstrating that power derived not from domination alone, but from wisdom, control, and understanding. In her rise, she discovered a deeper purpose. She became a beacon for those who had been silenced, marginalized, or oppressed. Her story was no longer just about survival. It was about transformation. People who had once believed that cruelty and fear could define their lives saw in her a roadmap to resilience, strength, and empowerment. She inspired a quiet revolution, proving that the human spirit, once honed in adversity, could become unstoppable. Even the scars she bore became symbols of triumph, reminders that the darkest trials could produce unbreakable fortitude. Each scar carried a story of endurance. Each challenge she overcame became a lesson in strategy and inner strength. She had moved from prisoner to power, from helplessness to mastery, not by chance, but through relentless determination and unwavering focus. Her journey was a testament to the idea that the greatest strength is born from suffering, and the woman who had once been caged had now become a force whose rise would forever alter the world around her.